Then she drew the gun, calm as still water. She leveled both barrels at Mike's chest and said, "Step back, or I'll put a hole in you smaller than your brain." Her hands trembled a fraction enough to remind me that beneath the steel, she was flesh and nerve. A woman with that kind of grit dying cheap while cowards watched, not on my watch. Mike eased off, palms lifted in a sneer. "This ain't finished. You won't hide behind that toy forever." Rebecca didn't blink. "I won't have to. One shot's enough. Ever have a single instant split your life clean in two like a Bowie through rawhide? That was hers." By morning I was riding toward Circle H Ranch with a bedroll, and a choice I already half regretted. 29 years old, 5 spent with the 6th Cavalry soldiers out of Fort Huachuca, running Apache canyons after Apache raiders. The Army taught me to shoot straight, ride hard, and never leave good people exposed. I can manage whatever trouble's brewing. She studied me a long beat. A woman like her had survived too much to be fooled. $30 a month meals and a bunk, she said at last. "You try anything improper, and you'll meet the business end of my Derringer." "Wouldn't dream of it, ma'am." Swinging down, I noticed the way her dress traced curves that dried my mouth, the grace of her stride, the confidence earned by not breaking when the world expects it. She caught me looking. Our eyes held a heartbeat enough for a spark. I couldn't tell if it was recognition or another kind of trouble. Truth was, I'd lied. I dreamed of it. Plenty. The first 30 days crept by like fire along dry cheat grass, slow, ruthless, unstoppable. From sunup to sundown, I proved myself. Working horses with patience instead of brute force, I rebuilt fence lines earlier hands had let decay. I kept my words few, my pace steady, and my distance like a man who knew better. But evenings were the risky hours. Rebecca Harrison would carry coffee out to the bunkhouse porch. We talked as the heat bled from the desert, and the stars pricked the sky like needles in black velvet. She spoke of Philadelphia silk gloves, tight collars, and rooms that stole the air from your lungs. She told me how she met Thomas Harrison at a church social, how she married for security instead of passion, and how affection surprised them both, blooming like wildflowers after rain. "I never knew what it was to choose someone for myself," she said one night, watching my hands dress leather with the same careful touch I used on horses. Thomas was a good man. Our marriage was sensible, practical. He'd given her the Derringer on their wedding day. A lady's pistol, he'd said, practical the way he was, but it would drop a man just as dead as a .45. Practical matters, I told her, my voice rougher than I meant. But it isn't everything. Our eyes held in the lamplight, no coffee, no talk, just something catching fire. She studied me like a puzzle worth solving saw a man instead of a tool or a prize. I met that look knowing I was in deeper trouble than any Apache canyon had ever offered. The pull between us built like pressure behind a dam. I noticed how she lingered when she brought meals, how her breath stuttered when our hands brushed passing a water bucket, how her eyes traced my shoulders when she thought I wasn't looking. I found reasons to check the house after dark, my presence filling rooms that had been empty too long. I stood close enough to catch her scent, soap and sun, and something unmistakably Rebecca. But I was the hired hand, and she was a widow, surviving in a world eager to judge. Lines existed for a reason, even when crossing them felt like rescue. Then Big Mike Garrett decided lines were optional. One morning I found fresh hoofprints near the north pasture, too close to the house to be chance pressed deep like someone had been watching, waiting. Then a gate latch snapped in a way that looked planned, not worn. Clean. Intentional. After that, Rebecca grew uneasy whenever she rode to town alone. "Something's got you rattled," I said one evening as she paced the porch instead of settling into our usual talk. "Mike Garrett won't let it rest." She admitted, her hand drifting to her skirt where the derringer lay. "He's sending men with offers for the ranch." "Generous offers," I said. "The kind that carry threats." She turned to me, fear plain in her eyes for the first time. "He thinks I'll be more reasonable once I understand how exposed I am, how alone." My face hardened like a Kentucky winter. He's wrong. Still, we both knew courage has limits against numbers, money, and ruthless will. Mike Garrett had all three, plus a town that treated independent women like a disruption to the natural order. "Ever feel thunder in your bones before the sky splits?" That's how those days were. That's exactly how they felt. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I'd ridden into Tombstone for veterinary supplies, leaving Rebecca Harrison alone with chores that wouldn't wait. From 3 miles out, I saw the dust 6 riders moving hard, 2 pretending they weren't. I knew what it meant. I drove my gelding cut across ground only a cavalry scout would trust, and reached the yard just as Big Mike Garrett swung down his 5 men, fanning out in a loose arc that closed every path of escape. "Afternoon," Rebecca Mike called. "Figured it was time we talked about your future?" She edged toward the house, knowing she'd never reach it. "I'm not interested in a talk." "Course you aren't. That's why we're past talking." His grin was all wrong. "Thomas Harrison left you set up fine, good land, a solid house, and a pretty woman to go with it. But you can't run a spread like this by yourself forever. Time to face reality." Beneath her skirt, her thumb found the derringer's hammer. "Reality is I've run this ranch just fine for 3 years, she said, voice steady, despite the fear I knew was there. "Reality is you're trespassing." "My land," Mike laughed. "Sweetheart, you own only what men allow you to keep. Time you learned how things really work." That's when I sent his hat spinning into the dust with my first shot warning only calling from the ridge. My Colt sat easy in my hand. "Next one won't be." Well, now Mike said, his hand drifting. The hired help had opinions, more than opinions. They had a duty to protect this place and everyone on it. Then hell broke loose fast as summer lightning and twice as loud. My second round caught one of Mike's men in the shoulder, ripping him from the saddle with a scream. His horse bolted and the odds tilted toward survival. Rebecca proved she was Thomas Harrison's widow, in more than name. As he disappeared, Rebecca and I both knew something essential had shifted. Lines had been crossed. Blood had spilled. There was no returning to the careful distance we'd kept. In the hush after violence, we stood closer than propriety, allowed adrenaline and shared danger, forging a bond stronger than simple attraction. Her breathing came hard. My pulse thundered, and the space between us felt alive, like the air right before a lightning strike. "You're bleeding," Rebecca Harrison murmured, noticing the dark stain spreading along my sleeve. "It's nothing I began, but she was already steering me toward the house, her hands shaking for reasons that ran deeper than gunfire. Some fences once broken never go back up." The house changed the moment I stepped inside, smaller, closer humming, with the chances we'd been denying for weeks. "Sit," Rebecca ordered, gathering supplies with unsteady fingers. "Let me see." I sank into Thomas Harrison's old chair and felt the weight of it even as pain flared in my arm. She eased my shirt off, her touch light against my skin, and the wound mattered less than the current snapping between us. The bullet had cut a shallow groove across my upper arm, hurtful, not deadly. But Rebecca had been alone too long, had refused herself too much to ignore the sight of my bare chest in her sitting room. Lamplight slid over muscle earned by honest work scars, telling the truth of a hard life lived straight. When she leaned in to clean the cut, her breath hitched. I caught her scent, soap, fierce sweat, and something unmistakably woman that set every nerve on fire. "You're staring," I said softly, my voice rough with restraint. "I'm appreciating," she answered. Her fingers stayed gentle on my arm, while her eyes wandered far from any medical purpose. It's been a long time since I had reason to appreciate anything about a man. I drew a sharp breath. Mrs. Harrison Rebecca. She lifted her gaze, and what I saw there nearly stopped my heart. After today, she said, I think we're past formalities, don't you? The distance between us shrank without either of us moving. Her palm rested on my chest, feeling the steady strength there. I brushed her cheek, traced her jaw with care. Is your mind always on what's under my skirt, Mr. Carter? She whispered the words carrying a double meaning that widened my eyes. The derringer, the gun that had saved us both today, and the woman too, her warmth, her curves, and 3 years of loneliness tucked beneath duty and decorum. Well, ma'am, I said, my thumb grazing her lower lip, it's the danger and the beauty that have my attention. I kissed her, and something inside us broke open like a dam finally giving way. This wasn't Thomas's measured tenderness or Mike's brutal claim. This was hunger meeting hunger, need answering need, two people finding something rare in a harsh world. My hands slid into her hair, loosening the careful pins that held it back. She arched into me, her mouth finding the pulse at my throat and pulling a low sound from my chest. I want to protect you. I breathed against her ear, not because she couldn't protect herself, but because she shouldn't have to. Because the thought of harm finding her again was unbearable. It was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever said to her. I saw it in her eyes. We came together there in the sitting room on the rug before the fireplace. Desert wind whispered through the eaves, and the echo of shared danger still crackled in our blood. I touched her with care, like gentling a half-broke mare, slow, attentive, listening to every shiver and breath. Slow and attentive. I listened to every tremor, every hitch in her breathing, until she was shaking and calling my name like a prayer. Her dress slipped away firelight, turning her skin the color of cream. She was beautiful curves, fitting my hands just right, a softness at her belly that made her real, not some saloon-made dream. I kissed the hollow at her throat, where her pulse raced the line between her breasts, the inside of her wrist. She gasped when my mouth found her arched when my hand slid lower, and I felt how ready she was wanting. Please, she whispered, pulling me up to her mouth with desperate need. I know, I said. I know what you need, Rebecca. I entered her slowly, watching her face, as I filled her seeing pleasure wash away years of loneliness and careful restraint. Her eyes widened, then softened, then burned with hunger as she settled around me. She locked her legs at my waist, urging me closer, and we found a rhythm as old as the desert, unhurried at first, then faster as need overran caution. Firelight played across us, turning skin to gold. She crested first, crying my name, her body tightening like a cinch pulled hard, nearly taking me with her. Then again, when I shifted, found that place inside her that made her see stars and forget every rule the world had taught her about proper widows. When I followed, spilling myself with a sound dragged from deep inside, we were both slick with sweat, shaking with satisfaction, and with something deeper than release. Afterward, we lay tangled on the rug, her head on my chest, my fingers combing through her loosened hair, listening to our breathing find its calm. Rebecca felt a certainty she hadn't known since girlhood, the sure knowledge of being exactly where she belonged. And I felt something I never expected after years of drifting and fighting and surviving. Home. Dawn brought reality, with an Arizona sun pouring through windows we'd forgotten to cover. Rebecca woke in my arms, and I felt decisions settle on us like a mantle. She lay quiet, at first, tracing the scars on my chest with gentle fingers. I could feel her weighing the cost. "They'll call me a whore for taking up with my hired hand," she said at last. "No shame, just clear-eyed truth. Big Mike Garrett will use it against me. Say my judgment can't be trusted. My face set, not in regret, but resolve. Then maybe it's time we find a new town, I said. California's got good ranch land around San Francisco Bay, places where folks judge you by what you do not, what they think they know. The idea hit her like a .45, sudden, bright, obvious the moment it landed. She had money from Thomas's investments, enough to buy well anywhere west. I had skills that carried to any frontier. Together we could build something new, something ours. You'd do that? She asked, searching my face for doubt. Leave it all to go west with a woman 10 years older, with a name that might follow us. I framed her face so she could see the truth. Since Ma Carter died, I've been blowing like a tumbleweed. I finally found my stake right here in this room in you. I kissed her, then slow, deliberate binding the promise between us. Besides, I said 38 and 29 aren't much of a gap when both souls are grown. Any man who faults me for choosing a woman of substance over some green girl who doesn't know her own mind well, his opinion isn't worth the dust on my boots. She smiled open and true, and I saw the Rebecca Harrison who had faced 6 men with a derringer and never flinched. The woman who'd run a ranch alone for 3 hard years. The woman who'd just chosen to burn her life down for the chance at something real. 6 months on, we stood on a hillside above San Francisco Bay, watching ships shoulder through rough water while seabirds wheeled overhead. Circle C Ranch, our ranch, stretched behind us, bought with the money from selling Rebecca's Arizona spread, and named by weaving our initials together. 2,000 acres of California green, enough to carry cattle horses, and the hopes of 2 people forged in Arizona's hard beauty. Rebecca still carried her derringer, the pearl-handled Colt Point. 4-1 Thomas Harrison had given her on their wedding day, the same weight I'd felt against her thigh the first time I saw her. Now it guarded us both. Insurance in a world that could still turn sharp on those who refused to bend. A talisman for a different kind of love, a different future. No more hiding what's under that skirt, Mrs. Carter, I said, my arm around her waist as the sun sank into the Pacific. Nothing to hide from you, husband, Rebecca answered, leaning into me with a certainty that felt exactly right. Behind us, the ranch hands called cattle home for evening. Their voices mingled with the ocean breeze and the cry of gulls' music, nothing like Arizona's dry silence. Ahead waited whatever California might throw our way, drought or flood market swings or claimed jumpers, the 1,000 trials that come with any frontier. But that night, we had each other, and the knowledge that some risks are worth taking no matter the danger. In the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Now you've heard my story, friend. Was I wrong to cross those lines, to stake everything on a woman I barely knew, to claim what the world said wasn't mine? Some would call me a fool, a drifter who took advantage of a widow and her land. Others would say I finally found something worth fighting for, worth guarding, worth building a life around. I've done plenty I'm not proud of, killed men, broken promises, walked away when things turned hard. But loving Rebecca Harrison, starting over with her, in California. That's the one thing I got right. That's the story. It still makes my old heart thump when I think on it. So tell me, partner, where are you hearing this from tonight? Ever step over a line for a woman worth every inch of hell it brought? Keep riding toward your own horizon. And remember, sometimes the difference between a fool and a hero is just which side of the tale you're hearing. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso Legal /disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment. and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process, but every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.